The UN Climate Summit is taking place in New York today, where more than 120 heads of state and government have convened for what the UN is describing as the largest gathering seeking to tackle climate change in history. Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has told leaders to bring bold announcements and actions that will reduce emissions. All right, this is our chance. A world stage. What can Tony Abbott bring?
Mr. Abbott will not be attending.
Why the f*** not?
My first duty, in a sense, is to the Australian Parliament.
Right, so you're just going to spend this week in Australia?
Australia's Prime Minister Tony Abbott will be in New York.
So he's going to be in New York this week, but he's not going to the summit. What, has he committed to a Sex and the City walking tour?
But he'll arrive one day after those other world leaders for a Security Council meeting.
1 day late for the climate change summit. Really, Tony? You couldn't have ducked out of Parliament a little early? You've done it before.
Tony Abbott and two other opposition MPs dashed for the door.
It's a shame he can't make it, because he's got so many ideas about climate change he could bring to the table. First of all, we've got a tax on carbon to encourage businesses to reduce their use of fossil fuels.
Tony Abbott scraps Australia's carbon tax.
Sure, but we still have the Climate Commission, which was set up to provide public information on the effects of and potential solutions to climate change.
Abbott shuts down Climate Commission.
Okay, but what about the 1 million solar roofs program? That was an election promise. If I know one thing about this government, it's that they keep their election promises.
Government dumps election promise for million solar roofs.
Wow, next you'll tell me the government wants to ban the sale of these solar-powered fan hats.
Aww.
But there is one idea to save the environment the government could take to the summit: creating a green army of young people who will be paid less than the minimum wage to plant trees. Ban Ki-moon won't know what hit him. Now, while Abbott won't be at the summit to pitch that idea, to be fair, he isn't the only Prime Minister who'll be absent. India's Prime Minister also won't be attending.
The Environment Minister of India will be going.
That's interesting. We aren't sending our Environment Minister to the Climate Summit. Why aren't we sending our Environment Minister, Greg Hunt?
Greg Hunt uses Wikipedia research to dismiss links between climate change and bushfires.
Why didn't he just ask the Science Minister?
There is no Science Minister in Tony Abbott's new ministry.
So who are we sending to the Climate Summit?
Foreign Minister Julie Bishop will represent Australia.
Makes sense. I understand climate change is a foreign issue that won't affect us here in Australia. Just listen to Professor Will Steffen from the Climate Council.
If you look at some of our most vulnerable areas, and the Sydney region is one of those, you would say toward the end of the century that a 1 in 100-year flood is going to be happening every few days.
Looks like from now on, Sydney's city to surf is just going to be surf. Of course, climate change isn't the top of Abbott's priorities. After all, he's told us he wants to be known as an infrastructure Prime Minister. I think the latest Climate Council report has something to say about that.
More than $200 billion of infrastructure is at risk if the worst-case scenario comes true.
Better make that an infrastructure underwater Prime Minister. In his defence, though, no one in Australia really cares about climate change anyway.
Melbourne Rally for Climate Change Action attracts 30,000 people.
Well, no one from Australia who's invited to the UN Climate Summit cares about climate change anyway. For the roast, I'm Mark Humphries.
Subscribe or Tom gets it! Wait, that's not gonna work. Everyone hates you.
How about subscribe and Tom gets it?
Yeah, that'll work. Thanks, Tom.
No worries, Nick.
Shut up, Tom!